Assalamu alaikum. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 16th edition of School of Tomorrow events, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. The non-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in 2000 to engage global communities in conversations that shape the future of schools and societies. I would like to thank Google for Education, the lead sponsor for SOT 2023, their partner Tech Valley, and our titanium sponsor UBL. Other key sponsors include My Backpack, MK Books, Allied Bank Limited, Habib Bank Limited, Wateen, and Interwood. We also thank our SOT supporters, including Paramount Books and Nestle Pure Life, who have contributed to this year's event. Moving on to our housekeeping instructions, please ensure your cell phones are silent. Please use the SOT app to scan the QR code for session Q&A and feedback. Share your thoughts on social media using the hashtags, that is, hashtag Guardians of the Future and hashtag SOT 2023. If you need assistance, our ushers are here to help you. For questions, please either use the flashcards provided by the ushers or the mobile app. The panel discussion will last for about 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes for question and answers. Next on the bucket, we have a beautiful conversation, an afternoon with Jeffrey Archer, and the moderator for this session is Ms. Rania Faisal. Ms. Rania Faisal is a passionate A-level student at Beacon House, Karakoram campus, Islamabad. She is an avid reader and a high achiever who actively engages in debates and MUNs. She dreams of becoming a prolific writer in the future, taking inspiration from Lord Jeffrey Archer. Ms. Rania, welcome on board.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to introduce Ms. Salima Hashmi as the interviewer of this session. Salima Hashmi is an artist, curator, and art historian. She is the founding dean at Maryam Dawood School of Visual Art and Design, Beacon House National University, and a former professor and principal of National College of Arts, Lahore. Ms. Hashmi is an award-winning author and recipient of the President's Medal for Pride of Performance. Well, our guest for this session needs no introduction, as we have grown up reading his books. Jeffrey Archer is a record-breaking author with 275 million copies sold worldwide, excelling in fiction, short stories, and nonfiction. An Oxford Blue in athletics, a former member of Parliament and the House of Lords. His latest novel, Traitor's Gate, is sixth in the line of William Warwick's series. An art collector, amateur auctioneer, and philanthropist who has raised over £51 million for charity. I will now hand this over to Ms. Salima Hashmi.
Welcome to Pakistan again, Mr. Jeffrey Archer, and this time to our capital, Islamabad. Your conversation with us last year struck quite a chord, especially with the younger generation to whom you constantly referred to in your conversation. We just felt that this should maybe an ongoing conversation between you and young people every year. As one octogenarian to another, I first want to ask you about the absolutely punishing routine that you described to us last year, the routine with which you write. And well, that was a year ago. So a year on, another year older, does it get any easier? Are you lightening up a little? And more important, do you still enjoy it? So for those of us who were not here, would you describe again the kind of writing routine you have?
It never gets easier. One assumes, one thinks, well, having reached the grand old age of 83, that it would get easier, but in truth it doesn't. I rise at 5:30 in the morning. I work from 6 until 8 for 2 hours. I take a 2-hour break. I work from 10 until 12 for 2 hours. I take a 2-hour break. I work from 2 until 4 for 2 hours. I take a 2-hour break. I work from 6 until 8 for 2 hours. I go to bed about 9:30. I rise again the next day at 5 to 5:30. The first draft will take me around 40 days, about 300 hours. And the book you have in front of you, Traitor's Gate, is the 14th draft. As I said, you would think it would get easier. I think I'm a better craftsman, but it still takes that amount of time if you want to be happy with it. Because you see, I handwrite every word. I'm not a modern child who can press buttons. Not me. I still handwrite every single word. It's typed up for me by a secretary, triple spaced. Then I work on it with a pencil. And that's sent back, and this process goes on. And on my desk in the next room, I have the 14th draft. I hope I'm reading it through for the last time, but I still can't be sure.
If we can talk a little bit about the Warwick series, because this is something that you talked about extensively last year, and because it is a series, about this constable who you start with, and you projected that the last of the series you would be writing when you were 86. Are you still planning it to be that way?
Well, every book is individually different. Every book is an individual and different subject. So it might be drugs, it might be murder, it might be police protection. The latest one is about stealing the crown jewels, which was given to me in a very strange circumstances. I was on a ship with my wife traveling around the coast and sat next to a man who said he'd got the story for my next book, which I usually say, have you killed your wife? And if they don't say yes, I move on. And then he said, even worse, he said, I can tell you how to steal the crown jewels. And everyone knows that the crown jewels has only been stolen once by Colonel Blood in 1671, and he didn't even get out of the tower. And I would have moved on if I hadn't been only at the soup course. But then he announced that he was a member of the royal household. So I listened more carefully, and in 2 minutes he told me how to steal the crown jewels. And it did indeed become the next book. It required the most immense amount of research, because everything depends on the timing. So that's the latest book. Now, to answer your more demanding question, at my age, you do begin to wonder how much longer you will be allowed to go on. And I've had an idea in my mind for several years that has been coming to fruition. So I might make a break in the next year and write a standalone novel, which, as I say, has been fermenting in my mind and is an attempt to write the new Kane and Abel.
This series that you're talking about, it is centered, or it's included, people who you've known well. And there are people who are well known to the world at large, like Margaret Thatcher, for example, or Princess Diana. And then you say that, okay, Warwick has been there throughout. He started as a constable and so on. Does Warwick evolve? Do you work on the fact that the man is also aging? Things are changing in his life. How do you plan to, or how do you think about evolving this character so that his personality evolves at the same time as he's getting older?
Well, it began as a constable in the first book, Nothing Ventured. He then goes to being a sergeant when he tackles drugs. He then goes to being an inspector when he tackles murder. He then goes to chief inspector when he tackles art theft. And so it moves up. And yes, he does develop. He and his wife, Beth, and their children move on and on and on. And the plan was always that it would be a separate individual book, but every time he would be a different rank and he would be doing a different crime. And I hope to live to 86, as you mentioned, because by then he would have become the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, having gone on to Superintendent, Chief Superintendent, Commander, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. So I need to live that long.
There's a kind of elite circle that you often describe, which your life and your access has allowed you. Do you purposely seek out those people as being, players in your stories? Do you, alongside, seek out those who are really living on the margins or who are the down and out? Do you use them as sources of inspiration as well?
Every human being is a source of information, and every time I meet people, I'm equally fascinated by them. So yes, everybody counts. I have had the privilege of working with Margaret Thatcher for 11 years and with working with Princess Diana as her auctioneer for her charity work. So it was irresistible next in line not to do a story about Princess Diana. And of course, Margaret Thatcher gets regular mentions because that's the period of time I'm going through. But what you call down and outs are just as interesting to me, and sometimes far more interesting than the rich and famous.
Hundreds and thousands of people have read your books and enjoy them.
What?
Sorry,
100 million
sorry,
people,
millions.
Oh, wait. 100 million people have read
Millions
Kane
and
and Abel.
millions.
What do you mean? 100 million people. What do you mean? I'm coming off this show.
Absolutely. So the question I want to ask you is, what do you read? What do you read, presuming you get time to read? And do you read whodunits also?
I read a book a week, usually on recommendation. Usually someone saying, you mustn't miss this, Jeffrey. My favorite author is Stefan Zweig, a remarkable Austrian author who tragically committed suicide when he thought Hitler was going to win the war. He only wrote 2 novels, but many brilliant non-fiction books and novellas. But I commend to you one of his books in particular, Chess. Well, it's a novel, it's a novella really, and it will get you going. And then you will go on to his masterpiece, Beware of Pity. So yes, I read a book a week if I can, usually on recommendation. And my favorite author is Stefan Zweig.
What about the classics? What about those greats in English literature? Who's your absolute favorite and why?
Well, Shakespeare, of course, a genius. I'm going to King Lear for the 9th time, or at least my 9th King Lear next Thursday. I love the theatre and I love Shakespeare, who's the greatest writer and greatest storyteller of all time. Of the other classics, it's very simple to say you love Jane Austen, you love Charles Dickens, you love Emily Bronte. It's very easy to say, which is why I chose Stefan Zweig, because I wanted to stretch the people in the audience, knowing that every one of them will have already read the classics. I want them to start thinking about other authors.
Among your interests, you describe going to the theatre and also art collecting. You've done auctions for charity. I'm interested because of my own profession. I'd love you to talk about which particular artists, for example, do you follow artists, do you collect certain artists, or is there a moment in art history that you're particularly interested in? Would you like to introduce your art collection to this audience, talking about those things that you are passionate about, and perhaps will send people scurrying to look for those artists or those names or that period or that genre that interests you?
Over the years, I've collected the Impressionists, Monet, Manet, Picasso. I suppose Picasso isn't really an Impressionist. Pissarro. I've been a collector of the Impressionists. I buy a new painting with every book. So it's becoming a large collection, which my wife says don't buy any more because there are no walls left. I began 70 years ago. I purchased my first picture, which was a still life by a man called Davis, and I paid what would be the equivalent of $15 for it. So it was an early love affair, which has continued on and on. When I leave this talk, I'm going to the Art and Antiques Fair in Earl's Court, which is on once a year, to see what they're up to. I'm then having lunch with a distinguished art dealer in the centre of London. So it's been a long love affair and will continue. And all I would say to your audience is, study, look, look, look. Make your eye better. And there are a lot of artists around who are still a reasonable price because there is a lot of talent around. And I'll tell you a thing I discovered, and hold your breath because I can see the audience. Women are cheap. They charge less for their paintings than stupid men. Stupid men think they're rather good and charge too much. Sensible women don't charge enough in my view, and so my collection has a lot of women painters who are absolutely brilliant. Keep your eyes open, men. You're about to be defeated.
You're a great storyteller, of course. You talked about the fact that when you're writing, you very often don't know how the book is going to end, and which I find extremely intriguing, that you don't know when you're spinning this yarn as to what will it arrive, what will be the ending. Are you a tease? Do you do this to yourself? You certainly do it to your audience, where you leave them guessing. I'm just wanting to know how that ending culminates. What are the things that you draw upon?
I never know the ending. I have a strong theory that if I know the ending, clever people will work it out and they will know the ending. Sometimes I don't get it until the last 10 pages. Sometimes I get it halfway through. But basically, I'm a storyteller. I turn the page and pray.
To a certain extent, we are told that writers do dwell upon autobiographical experience, and certainly you have talked about people that you know. So we know that you knew them, and therefore they arrive in your books. But there must be other autobiographical details that enter your writing. Is that fair to assess that is the way it happens also with you? Do you delve into autobiographical aspects of your life?
Of course. And in fact, looking at your audience, I would say to them, you must write about what you know about and the people you've mixed and lived with, because then the reader will believe it. Don't write a ghost story because you think they're fashionable. Don't write a sex story because you think that's fashionable. Don't write a horror story or violence because you think that's fashionable. I have always written what I wanted to write, and I've been genuinely lucky and still being bought in numbers at 50 years later. Very lucky indeed. And don't be frightened. If you look at some of the Indian and Pakistani authors, you will see how they have written about their country and what they experienced, something I would be incapable of doing. In fact, a lady came to me the other day to complain that I had met so many famous people and had such an amazing and privileged life. Of course I could write a novel. So I said, what do you do? And she said, I work in a hairdresser. And I said, you'll get more stories in a hairdresser in 1 week than I'll get in a year.
So the next question is pretty obvious. Do you think you'll ever get down to writing your memoirs?
No, I've got the next 3 novels in mind. I know exactly where I'm going in theory, but you can't always decide your life more than a couple of days ahead. But no, I'm not interested in writing a biography.
There's a kind, I mean, I'm no literary critic, but there's a kind of cinematic quality to your writing, the way that, the scene changes, you describe settings, one feels a kind of camera zooming in to certain details. Has cinema influenced you? Do you enjoy going to the movies or watching them at home?
I think theatre has influenced me more. Yes, of course, I enjoy going to the cinema, and it was announced last week that Sony will be doing a remake of Kane and Abel, so that's rather exciting. And there's another company chasing hard on Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. So I may, if I'm lucky, see a couple of films in the future. So yes, of course I'm influenced by films, but I would say more by theatre.
You have talked about the fact that you're a writer of your time, places, locations, the events, and you yourself have said that you do, and last year you talked about certain ongoing events that you were witnessing. And as an observant person of your time, you must these days be observing certain things that are paramount, I think, in the thinking and worrying of people worldwide. Before our eyes, we see, if one is aware of it, the statistics yesterday afternoon were that a child was being killed every 10 minutes in Palestine, and that's since October the 7th. As a writer, will you be referring to these horrors of our time?
I think it unlikely, because the William Warwick series is set in, well, the latest book is in 2002. So these terrible things that are happening in Israel and in Palestine, I won't get there in time for that. And indeed, the new book, which I've been thinking over for years, is the story of a boy and a girl who are born on the first day of the Second World War, of the First World War, I'm so sorry, of the First World War, and takes them from 1918 through to 1942. So no is the answer to your question.
There are writers who suffer from writer's block. And the speculation in today's world is that, well, the obvious thing would be to refer to AI. Do you ever contemplate the possibility of a writer as prolific as you are, with as rigorous a working schedule, would ever need to refer to artificial intelligence?
I hope not. It's very frightening. It's a whole new world, and your audience is going to live through it. And what comes out the other end will be absolutely fascinating. I'm horrified to learn the other day that if I went into my publishers and delivered one of my short stories, and I've written 92 short stories, if I delivered one of my short stories, I read it, they could have all 26 novels with me reading, as if I had read the 26 novels. And worse, if you can believe it, they'll then have me reading in French, German, Italian, and I can't read a word of French, German, or Italian. So where it's going to go, I don't know. But I want to doubt that genuine originality is not possible in a robot. I like to believe the opening line of Kane and Abel. She only stopped screaming when she died. It was then that he started to scream. I'd like to believe a robot couldn't do that.
A very heartwarming aspect of your conversation last year was the way that you address especially the women, the young women in our audience. I would like you again, because this is a fresh batch of young women.
They're all.
Would you like to talk to them about the world that they are going to
bad.
inherit?
What? You're just as bad, by the way. You're all frightening, and you will overtake the world. What we haven't worked out, and I spotted it among young Pakistanis and young Indians, the next generation is going to be run by women. They're not only every bit as bright, if not brighter, they work so much harder. Men won't have a chance in the next century. God help them.
I think that we perhaps should then hand over to some of these young women.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm going to ask my co-host to ask some of her own questions and then put some of them to the audience.
And if I could thank you for your excellent questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salima Hashmi, for asking such intriguing questions, and to Mr. Archer for such witty responses, and for keeping us engaged in this entire conversation. If the audience has any questions for Mr. Archer, kindly note them on the flashcards available with the ushers. Now, I would like to ask some questions for Mr. Archer before we conclude this interview. If you could co-author a book with any living author, who would it be, and what type of story do you envision creating together?
Any living author
Yes.
is trickier for me than any dead author. I can think of a dozen dead authors I'd like to meet and talk to them and find out how their brains worked and what their routines were. Modern authors don't excite me as much as those of the past. But of course, I would be fascinated to meet. I've recently had lunch with David Walliams because I wanted to talk to him about the difference between writing a children's book and writing a novel. So he was fascinating, and indeed Giles Brandreth and Anthony Horowitz and Freddie Forsyth are all friends, so I'm able to talk to them about their work, and I hope learn from it.
Brilliant response indeed. Your work often features a dynamic duo. Do you think that having a close companion in real life has a significant impact on your outlook of life?
Well, I've been married to a very remarkable woman for 57 years. She was chairman at Cambridge University Hospital. The Queen made her a dame. She's now Dame Mary. She then went on, and it still is, chairman of the Science Museum in Great Britain, the first woman ever to chair a national gallery or museum in this country. So I've lived with a remarkable woman for 57 years. I worked with a remarkable woman called Margaret Thatcher for 11 years, and we remained friends after she stopped being Prime Minister. And my mother was a young councillor in her hometown when it wasn't fashionable for a woman to be doing politics. So strong women have dominated my life, and you're quite right, they dominate my books.
Incredibly inspiring. Have you ever thought about completely changing the genre of your books? If yes, what would that story consist of?
What are you suggesting? No, I'm happy, thank you. You go off and write your own books.
We must say we are very happy with your style of books as well. If you
Well,
happen to meet... Yes, sir, please go ahead.
You mustn't try to do something you don't feel at ease with. You must do your thing and pray the public will enjoy it. Where I've been particularly lucky is to hold on to generation after generation. And so that when you're going 50 years later, they're still out there, a totally new generation. That's been my greatest privilege.
Indeed. If you happen to meet one of the characters from your books, what are the questions you would like to pose to them, and how would you feel meeting them?
Well, having written 26 books, there are so many characters, not least, of course, Kane and Abel, which has now been read by 100 million people. So it's quite difficult to pick one, to be honest.
No doubt, no doubt. How have you beautifully managed to sustain the element of intrigue and involvement, not only for the older generation, but also for the younger minds?
Do you know, I think that's again luck. I think I can't put a finger on it. I think it surprises me as much as anyone that 14-year-olds come up to me in the road and say they read my books, as well as 90-year-olds. So it's very flattering that one goes from one end of the spectrum to the other, and that 60% of my readers are women. And no, I can't explain it. I'm frightened of even wanting to explain it, because I think I must just go on doing what I do and pray.
Thank you, sir. Let's take some questions from the audience. What do you think is the most common misconception about being a writer?
The most common misconception?
Yes.
I think the most common misconception is that it's easy. I take 1,000 hours to write a book, and I always say to young people, I'd love to be a ballet dancer. I'd love to be a violinist. I'd love to be an opera singer. And every one of you in the audience knows how hard and how difficult it is to reach the top of that profession, and how much talent you need to reach the top of that profession. It's no different if you want to be a writer.
What a highly accurate response. If you were to produce a movie based on one of your books, which one would it be and why?
Well, Kane and Abel has already been made into a miniseries. Not a Penny More was made into a film. First Among Equals was made into film. Sony have just repurchased Kane and Abel. But I think the answer is I would like Paths of Glory to be made into a film. The story of Mallory conquering Everest in 1924. Did he or didn't he conquer Everest? His body was found 700 foot from the top. Was he on the way down or was he on the way up? I've had several offers for that film, but it's never come to fruition. So I think Paths of Glory would be the one I'd most like to see made. And I have to point out that in India, not in Pakistan, in India they stole Kane and Abel. They're a bunch of thieves. They stole Kane and Abel, made it on Bollywood, and didn't pay me 1 penny. They changed the title and didn't pay me 1 penny.
I just finished reading Paths of Glory, so I would definitely love to see a movie based on that. How do you develop your characters and plot lines? Do you meticulously plan them or allow them to evolve naturally during the writing process?
I think the latter is the case. I think they evolve naturally. You see them growing up, doing things that you did when you were young, when you were middle-aged, when you first had children, when you first had grandchildren. And if you can express it on the page sometimes in a simple sentence, The reader will do what the great editor Corley Smith called nod. If someone nods when they're reading a book, you've hit a theme, you've hit a note that they associate with. And every writer is trying to achieve that. It's to make a reader not only turn the page, which is vital, but to nod and say, yes, I'm with you on this one, Geoffrey.
Self-doubt can be often challenging for authors. How do you navigate such an obstacle and maintain creative momentum?
How do I manage? I'm deaf, I apologize. How do I manage?
Self-doubt as an obstacle.
Hindsight. Did you say hindsight?
I don't understand.
Oh,
Could you
sorry.
repeat that, please? All right, I'll repeat the entire question. Self-doubt can be challenging for authors. How do you navigate such an obstacle and maintain creative momentum?
Oh, well, I'll be absolutely honest with you, it's never been a problem. I know the next 3 books. I've so many people I hear say, oh, I've got writer's block, or I don't know what to do next. I really feel for them because I always know what I want to do next. I never want to stop. As I said, the 14th draft of the new book is sitting in the next room, and I can't wait to get back to it. I love writing. It's a great privilege. By the way, you people who want to be writers out there, if you don't love it, forget it.
Thank you, sir, for your creative and captivating responses. On behalf of Beacon House, I thank Mr. Geoffrey Archer and Ms. Salima Hashmi, along with our audience, for participating in SOT 16, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. Please share your feedback regarding an email you will receive from the SOT team. Thank you to our panelists and our audience. We would also like to thank the sponsors, especially Google for Education, for helping to make this event possible. All right.
And can I thank you as well? Hello. Can I thank you as well? Always love coming on these shows and listening to the views of the young. Thank you, thank you.
Sir, if you do not mind, we have just received some more questions from the audience. Would you be willing to answer them?
For a few moments, yes.
Great. So the first question is, can every great storyteller be a writer?
They're not the same thing. It's a very good question. I am a storyteller. Writers are well-educated, well-read people who write, but storytelling is a gift. If you can combine both writing and storytelling, then you hit the jackpot. But I'm afraid storytelling is a gift.
Indeed it is. How did you develop an interest for writing books?
By mistake. I was a member of Parliament, wanted to be Prime Minister, was charging on my way in the House of Commons at the age of 29, thought I was certain to be Prime Minister by the age of 34, when I foolishly invested in a disastrous company and lost all my money and was facing bankruptcy and had to leave the House of Commons. I turned to writing by mistake at the age of 34. Remember, Proust said, we all end up doing the thing we're second best at.
Some of your best work is behind bars. How did you feel about writing in that particular space?
Well, it went an earlier question by your brilliant host at the beginning. It's when you are privileged to meet fascinating and different people than you would normally meet. Every writer needs experiences and needs to meet people.
Can you tell us about your writing process? How do you start?
No, I already have. You clearly weren't listening at the beginning of this program. Go home, my good woman. pay attention. All the others in the audience were paying attention. They'll tell you the answer to that one. Wake up!
Right, I think the audience should start paying more attention. Do you think of ChatGPT, where people can produce work from an ASI bot? Sorry, AI bot.
We've done the AI question.
Indeed, we have already asked you this question. Any more insight you would like to provide?
No, I'd like to say, when you leave, work hard. You will not reach anything in life without hard work. Here is my final comment. Are you listening carefully? If you have talent and what? Hey, wait. Listen carefully. If you have talent and energy, you will be a king. If you have energy but no talent, you'll still be a prince. But if you have talent and no energy, you will be a pauper. Goodbye.